No one in Burkina Faso could explain why unknown aircraft kept flying over the dark skies at night, but Ibrahim Traoré knew something was hidden inside those silent journeys. Before I reveal this truth, subscribe now, because the more you know, the more you realize how the world truly works. These were not ordinary flights, and Traoré's discovery would challenge powers far beyond his land. The first suspicion came when villagers near the northern borders reported strange sounds. They said the planes carried no markings, no flags, and no signs of origin. Children whispered about glowing lights that vanished into the clouds. At first, people thought it was military training, but Traoré felt the pattern was too calculated. Why were these flights only at midnight? Why did they never land at public airports? One evening, while sitting in a dim room with his closest advisors, Traoré pointed at a rough map spread across the wooden table. His finger traced the lines from Ouagadougou toward the desert strip where many of those flights were spotted. "This is not coincidence," he said firmly. His voice carried both anger and worry. "Something valuable is leaving our soil, and the people do not even know." An advisor hesitated, then spoke in a low tone. "Some say diamonds, smuggled under the cover of night. They vanish into the west before sunrise." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. If it was true, the betrayal was not only against the land, but against the very people struggling every day while their wealth was stolen. Traoré could not ignore it. He decided to travel without announcement, disguised as if he were a simple soldier. On the third night of his secret journey, he stood in the dusty airfield hidden between broken hills. The silence was heavy until a faint rumble grew louder. Out of the shadows, a massive plane emerged, its body painted in dull gray. No symbol, no identity. Men moved quickly, carrying crates sealed with thick locks. Under the faint lanterns, he caught a glimpse of what slipped from one crate, a shining stone, small yet blinding. His suspicion was no longer suspicion. It was proof. His heart pounded, not out of fear, but fury. He knew now that someone inside his own country had allowed this theft. Someone powerful, someone connected to the outside world. He clenched his jaw, whispering only to himself, "They think we will never find out, but they are wrong." At that very moment, he realized the scale of what he was standing against. It was not a small group of thieves. It was an entire network, stretching beyond Africa, beyond politics, into the very core of global greed. And once he had seen it with his own eyes, there was no way back. The plane roared into the sky, carrying stolen blood diamond toward the west, and Ibrahim Traoré stood beneath the fading thunder, knowing his next move would change everything.
The night after witnessing the secret flight, Ibrahim Traoré could not sleep. The image of that glowing stone falling from the crate kept flashing in his mind. Diamonds were leaving his homeland in silence, while his people struggled for food and dignity. He knew this was more than smuggling. It was a system designed to bleed Africa quietly. In the morning, he gathered a few loyal men in a small hut away from the capital. He did not trust the walls of official buildings anymore, because he feared that even within his own circle, eyes and ears might be working for outsiders. The hut smelled of dust and smoke, but it was safe. He looked at each man carefully before speaking. "I saw it with my own eyes," he said with a firm tone. "Diamonds, hidden in crates, carried to planes without names. And these planes go west." The men exchanged nervous glances. One of them, an older soldier, leaned forward and whispered, "If the diamonds are going out, then the deals are already inside. Someone from here is helping them. No plane flies this land without approval." Traoré nodded slowly. That was the truth he had feared. It was not possible for foreign planes to land in secret without someone powerful inside Burkina Faso allowing it. The betrayal was not distant, it was close, personal, and dangerous. Later that evening, he visited a small mining village where whispers of missing stones had already spread. An old miner, his hands cracked and face covered in deep lines, held out a pouch with tiny fragments. His voice shook as he said, "These are all we keep for months of work, yet every week, men with strange accents come and take more than we can imagine. They do not speak our language, but they come with authority. We cannot stop them." Those words struck Traoré like a blade. He realized the theft was not happening far away, it was happening at the roots, inside the villages where the earth itself bled wealth. The miners lived in poverty while strangers drained their soil and carried the diamonds into skies where no ordinary citizen had access. As he returned from the village, a young boy ran after his convoy, barefoot, with dust covering his legs. He shouted with desperation, "Do not let them take our stones again. My father says the earth cries each time they dig." Traoré stopped the car and looked at the child. He bent down, placed his hand on the boy's shoulder, and said quietly, "I promise you, I will not let this go unseen." But deep inside, he knew promises alone would not stop planes. This was not a crime carried out by shadows alone, it was a structured chain of greed. It involved miners forced into silence, guards paid to look away, and officials who signed papers with hidden hands. That night, while the city lights flickered, Traoré stared at the horizon. The planes would come again. And next time, he would not only watch. He would confront. But confrontation against such power meant war in silence. And wars in silence were the most dangerous of all. The third night arrived with a strange stillness in the air. Ibrahim Traoré stood at the same hidden airstrip, but this time he was not there to watch. He had placed his men in the shadows, each one hidden among rocks and trees, waiting in silence. The moonlight carved sharp lines across the land, and every sound of insects echoed like thunder. Traoré's eyes did not leave the horizon, because he knew the roar of the engines would soon return. And then it happened. A low rumble grew louder until the plane appeared again, its grey body gliding across the dark sky before landing without lights. Trucks followed from the distance, their wheels crunching against the dry earth. Men with covered faces jumped down, moving quickly to unload heavy crates. The same ritual, the same silence, as if they had done it 100 times before. But tonight, there was something different. Armed guards, more than before, standing with rifles ready. It was clear the smugglers were expecting danger. Traoré whispered to his closest soldier, "They know someone has seen them." His words cut through the night like a blade. The soldier replied, "If they know, then we are already inside their map." From his position, Traoré watched one crate fall to the ground. The wooden lock cracked open, and again the stones shone beneath the lantern light. Diamonds, bright, clear, priceless. But what caught his attention even more was a folder one guard carried under his arm. It was not just diamonds leaving the soil. It was records, contracts, evidence. Traoré clenched his fists. He wanted to strike, to stop the plane before it lifted, but he also knew this was not the moment. If his men opened fire, it would be war, and the diamonds would scatter into the hands of those waiting outside. He needed something stronger than bullets, he needed names, proof, and the courage to expose it. As the engines roared again and the plane began to rise, Traoré saw one of his men shift nervously. The tension was too heavy. For a moment, he feared one shot might break the silence. But no gun was raised, and the plane disappeared into the night sky once more. When the dust settled, Traoré gathered his men. His face was stern, his voice calm but sharp. "We are not fighting thieves," he said. "We are fighting a system. These planes do not belong to shadows, they belong to nations that smile in daylight and steal in darkness." One soldier asked, "Do we have the strength to face them?" Traoré looked at him for a long moment before answering, "Strength is not in numbers. Strength is in truth. And now the truth is with us. But remember, the closer we move, the more dangerous it becomes." The night ended, but the fire inside him grew brighter. He knew the West was not only buying diamonds, they were buying silence, buying loyalty, buying betrayal. And soon, he would have to decide which voice to raise first, against the strangers outside, or against the traitors within. Days turned into weeks, and Ibrahim Traoré could feel the walls closing around him. Whispers followed him through the halls of power. Every meeting carried eyes that seemed too curious, smiles that felt too forced. He had not spoken openly about what he witnessed at the hidden airstrip, but somehow the air carried his secret. He knew then what he had feared from the beginning: there were traitors inside his own circle. One evening, as he sat with only a dim lamp burning, an envelope was slipped under his door. No signature, no seal, only a folded set of documents. He opened it slowly, and his breath tightened. Inside were copies of agreements, stamped and signed. Names he recognized, names of men who stood beside him in public, men who claimed loyalty, were authorizing shipments under coded contracts. The words were simple yet deadly: resource transfer for development aid. But Traoré knew what it truly meant. Diamonds in exchange for silence. Wealth leaving the land in crates while promises of aid returned as nothing but chains. The betrayal burned inside him. He paced the room, his hands trembling not with fear but with rage. "So it is true," he muttered. "They are not only stealing from our soil, they are buying our leaders with lies." His reflection in the glass window looked back at him with the weight of decision. If he spoke this truth too early, the traitors would crush him. If he stayed silent, the planes would keep flying. The next morning, he called for a discreet meeting with one of the old miners he trusted. They met under the cover of an abandoned warehouse near the edge of the capital. The miner placed a cloth on the table and revealed a handful of uncut diamonds. "These should feed families for years," the miner said bitterly, "yet we are given crumbs while strangers eat the feast." Traoré listened carefully, his heart heavy. The miner added in a low voice, "The people will stand with you if you rise. But if you fall, they will bury the truth with you." As Traoré drove back through the city, he noticed foreign vehicles moving near government compounds, men in suits speaking languages not native to his soil. They were not hiding. Their confidence showed they believed no one could challenge them. That confidence only deepened his resolve. That night, he spoke to his most trusted soldier. "The fight ahead is not only against planes or diamonds. It is against the betrayal of our own. And that battle is always the hardest." The soldier looked at him with quiet loyalty. "Then we fight in silence until the silence becomes too loud to ignore." In his heart, Traoré knew the storm was near. The West had its hands deep in his country, but what pained him more was that the same hands were guided by men who shared his flag. The diamonds were not only stones now. They were symbols of betrayal, symbols that would either shatter his people or awaken them. The pressure on Ibrahim Traoré grew heavier with each passing day. Strange calls reached his office with no voice on the other end. Cars followed him through the city, stopping when he stopped, moving when he moved. He felt the eyes of invisible forces watching his every step. He knew the West was aware of his suspicion, and he knew the traitors inside were growing restless. One evening, as he reviewed reports, a coded message arrived through a loyal channel. It warned of an unusual gathering near the outskirts, where government officials were meeting foreign agents. Traoré did not wait. With a handful of trusted men, he left under the cover of night. They reached a compound hidden between abandoned factories. Through the broken walls, Traoré saw what he feared: officials from his own land, shaking hands with Western men in tailored suits. Crates were stacked high, guarded by armed soldiers. The conversation carried in fragments through the night air. "The shipments must continue. The next route will cross through the northern corridor. Payments are already secured." His heart tightened. The betrayal was not whispered anymore. It was spoken aloud, with confidence, as if the land itself was already sold. Traoré signaled to his men to stay low. His eyes caught one detail: a document being passed from hand to hand. It was marked with both local and foreign seals. Proof that the trade was sanctioned, proof that diamonds were being exchanged for money disguised as development aid. Suddenly, one of the guards turned sharply, his torch flashing toward the shadows. For a tense moment, the beam hovered dangerously close. Traoré held his breath, his hand ready on his weapon. But the guard turned back, dismissing the sound of distant dogs barking. The silence returned, but the danger had never been closer. Back at his residence, Traoré laid the pieces together. The diamonds were not simply being smuggled. They were part of a chain stretching from the mines of Burkina Faso to the glass towers of the West. And those who should have defended the people were the very ones opening the gates. He gathered his closest advisors once again. "The truth is in my hands now," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "But truth without courage is silence. If I speak, they will come for me. If I stay silent, they will continue to rob us. Which path do we choose?" The room stayed quiet until the old soldier spoke. "You already know the answer. If you remain silent, you betray the child who begged you to save his land. If you speak, You risk your life, but you save the soil. Traoré nodded slowly. The decision had been made in his heart long before. He would not allow diamonds to leave without a voice rising against it. He would stand before the world, even if the world tried to bury him. The stage was set. The planes were still flying, the diamonds still leaving, but now, for the first time, the silence was about to break. The day of decision arrived without warning. Ibrahim Traoré walked into the grand hall where leaders, officials, and foreign envoys were gathered for what was supposed to be a routine meeting. The air carried a strange tension, as if everyone sensed that something unusual was about to unfold. Traoré held in his hand a simple folder, the same folder that carried copies of the agreements he had uncovered in the shadows. His heart was steady, his voice firm. When the moment came for him to speak, he rose slowly, and the entire room fell silent. For weeks, he began, I have watched planes fly across our skies without names, carrying the wealth of this land into the hands of strangers. For weeks, I have seen the faces of miners broken by hunger while diamonds vanish under the cover of night. And for weeks, I have stayed silent, watching, waiting, learning who among us is part of this betrayal. Gasps moved through the hall. Eyes turned sharply, some filled with fear, some with anger, others with guilt. The Western envoys shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. Traoré lifted the folder, opening it for all to see. These documents, he declared, show the truth. Diamonds traded for promises of aid that never arrive. Contracts signed not for the people, but for the pockets of a few. This is not development. This is theft, carried out in the name of progress. The silence broke into murmurs, but Traoré's voice cut through them. I will not allow this to continue. If I must stand alone, I will still stand. This soil belongs to our children, not to the shadows of greed. At that moment, one of the local officials rose sharply, his face red with fury. You are endangering everything. These agreements keep our nation alive, he shouted. But Traoré looked him in the eyes and answered calmly, no. These agreements keep us chained while others grow rich. A nation that sells its soul for silence is not alive, it is buried. The room erupted in chaos. Some officials shouted for order, some tried to dismiss his words as lies, while the foreign envoys whispered urgently into their devices. But among the noise, one sound was louder, the quiet applause of a few men and women in the back, ordinary citizens who had been allowed inside to observe. Their claps grew stronger, and soon voices rose in unison. The diamonds belong to us, they cried. For the first time, the hall was divided not by silence but by truth. Traoré knew the battle ahead would not be easy. The West would not retreat without pressure. The traitors inside would not give up their power without resistance. But the spark had been lit. The silence had been broken. As he left the hall, the chants of the people followed him into the streets. Planes still roared in the night skies, but now the world had heard his voice. And one question burned in every heart: how many more secrets still waited to be uncovered beneath the soil of Africa?